Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Oh, there we go. All right. I think the recording button worked this time.
Hello, Kent.
I was yelling at Hunter like, why are we not recording? Lawson, how's it going, man?
What's up, man? I'm doing great. Happy week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. At the time we're recording this, it is Thanksgiving is upon us. I think this episode will drop right around Christmas for the first time. Now, for all I know, you're listening to this in like April or July. I don't know when you're listening to this. But what we wanted to talk about on today's episode is kinda Christmassy. So right now, here we are in mid-November, and I have a 6-year-old in the home, Lawson. And one of the things that we handed him about 2 weeks ago is we handed him, I can't remember whether it was from Amazon or Target, but it was one of the retailers that had like a Christmas catalog, one of those little, and they sent it in the mail, and we handed him the catalog and we gave him a pen. And even though he knows he's not going to get everything that he might circle, it is a bit of it's like not a tradition, but it's like a little fun experience that we let them go do. And they go through the catalog and they circle a couple things that they might like to have for Christmas. And so the only problem you have is when the 6-year-old hands it back and there's like 97 things circled. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That can create a bit of a problem. But on the
That's funny
upside,
you say all that. That brought back a memory for myself. Yeah. My mom and dad did that.
Did they really?
Yeah. It was as you were talking about it, I was like, wow, that's a blast from the past.
Man, given our ages, you probably circled a Daisy Red Ryder BB gun, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
A radio flyer wagon.
It was also one of the clues that clued me in on Santa Claus. I was like, all right, so how does this work? How does it work that I picked this from a book here and Santa's elves make this train from Sears?
Right. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. As a 7-year-old, you're thinking, how come Santa wasn't on the front of this catalog? Dude, that's
so anyway,
hilarious.
Your story, back to him.
So back to the story. The good news is when a 6-year-old circles 97 things, the upside to that is he doesn't remember hardly any of them. That's the best part is you're like, he forgets most of what he circled because it's just like circle overwhelm, right? Where he's just circling too much stuff. But the reason I bring that up is because often, if you and I were walking down the hall and we bumped into a guy and we said, hey, what are you getting your kids for Christmas? He wouldn't think of like spiritual gifts or emotional gifts or relational gifts. He'd probably think of physical gifts. It's Susie talks a lot or whatever, a little elf reference for you. And that's what he'd probably think of, or a Buzzsaw Louie little Veggie Tales reference for you. So what's interesting though, as dads, is I would love to have a conversation with you. And you and I started this conversation before we began recording about what are some of the spiritual or relational or just non-tangible gifts that we can give our kids this Christmas. And even the reason I think this would be a good episode to record is it's not locked down to Christmas, right? It's gifts we can give our kids throughout the year as we go through the year. What were a couple of those gift ideas, Lawson, that came to mind as you were thinking about this episode today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually wanted to insert something before we get into the.
No, you can't do that, man. I've already started. Well, I don't know what you're doing.
Well,
don't get me off track.
You're not the boss of me, bro. My thought was, like, because we're coming into this season of holidays, Christmas in particular, where, it's kind of centered around gift giving. It's a good time to have this kind of thought, not necessarily about what physical gifts are coming anybody's way or not, but and I don't want to lose a thought on, there are some people where the holidays are very tough. It's a very tough time. And they may be looking for a different sort of gift altogether that is just not going to be able to come to them right now until, I guess if they're going through a struggle, some sort of tragedy happened in their life. And that, I don't want to forget those dudes out there that this may be a super hard time to go through. But what I was saying is we were in a store this past weekend and Christmas trees are up and, there's just this feeling in the air of it's that time of year. And so, okay, this is as good a time as any, but I think we could ask ourselves this question often. It doesn't just have to be, like you said, because it's dropping for us, this episode on Christmas time. It's a useful introspective kind of thing to ask yourself as a dad. And so, yeah, spiritual gifts. I had a conversation with one of my guys at work earlier today, in fact, just kind of getting my thoughts together for us, and said, what comes to mind when I say something about, what sorts of non-physical gifts might you as a godly dad have in mind for Christmas? And he immediately went to traditions.
Ooh, interesting.
Which I thought was cool. And it was not, a tradition of we start in age order and the first, the youngest gets to open the first gift first. It was about, he said, it's kind of a corny thing we've always done, but we know that Christmas Eve is pajama time. He goes, it's not about opening a present, a box and getting up. Everybody knows it's pajamas. It's what the kids look so forward to, especially now that he's got a 23-year-old who's come back. She lives out and she's coming home for the holidays. Yeah. He said, man, if we did not do the pajama thing, we'd have a revolt, of our kids, because they look so forward to everybody going and getting in their PJs and then coming back and getting hot chocolate, sitting around, talking about just catching up. He said, it's not the reception of a gift. It is the time that we have as a family that is special to that Christmas Eve experience. And he said, now that I'm listening to myself talk about it, he goes, I think it's about the time that we spend together, that special, carved out, kind of different than normal time, and phones are put away, and, people are home when maybe they haven't been home for a while. He said, so, I think number one is it's something to do with tradition. Yeah. But it's mostly about that time, that family time.
Man, no kidding. In fact, I do find most of the jobs I've had over the years, I know some guys, Christmas is a very busy season based on their job. And it's like, man, it's crunch time, for whatever job they have. Most of the jobs I've had have always been, relatively speaking, slower at Christmas. I've had a little more time, and kind of that week between Christmas and New Year's is relatively dead. And so I've usually had a fair amount of time around Christmas to be able to spend more of it at home. And I think of one of the things that, I do love to try to give my boys. We've had 5 sons, as a lot of the listeners would know, and their ages 22 down to 6. And so one of the gifts I've tried to give my boys over the years is as much of my time as I can possibly give them. I know it goes fast. Just this past weekend, I drove to a Pittsburgh Steelers game, so about 6 hours away, and I took my 17-year-old son with me. And so we went to a Steelers game, and it's a long story as to why and, all that. But a good friend of mine gave us some great tickets, man, like 3rd row right off the field. It was amazing. We got to see a completely freezing rain tie. I mean, a tie, a tie game. Nobody won. And we sat in the rain for 3 hours. It was unbelievable. But point is, even the fact that it was a tie, right, which is kind of odd and unique in football, but the distance, the drive time, my son got yelled at by one of the Steelers fans because he wasn't wearing any Steelers gear. It's hilarious. And just all that stuff that you kind of connect to the event, most of which you couldn't have totally predicted. Definitely couldn't have predicted the outcome, but the time, just finding time to hang out with my son is, for me, it's a little bit even of a selfish gift, right? Like, I mean, I had a blast, but I do love trying to find time with my boys. And I think about traditions. One of the traditions that my wife has insisted on for years is, which I love this idea, and I won't take credit for it. It was her idea. We do a birthday present for Jesus tradition where we have a birthday cake, we blow out candles, we eat cake. And while we eat the cake, we talk about what is a gift we're going to give to Jesus in the following year. Usually it revolves around like something like mine's always been, not always, but often mine has been, I'm going to give Jesus the gift of being slow to speak because I tend to talk before I think often, and I'll speak out in ways that are
Is Jesus still waiting on his gift?
I don't appreciate the tone, Lawson, that you know, but hey, there's a lot of truth to that, where it's like, he's kind of like, okay, Kent, you've pretended to give me that gift now for like 18 years running.
You keep rewrapping that same gift over and over each Christmas.
Re-gifting. But even that is like, it's kind of silly, but also really meaningful at the same time. And we each get a moment to share kind of what's on our mind, what's on our heart. And for me, that's become a really, really fun tradition. I wouldn't even have said it was a tradition until now. Here we are in year, 20 or 22, or however long we've been doing it. And it's become a really fun part of our Christmas.
Idea. Yeah. I don't want to harp on the time thing, but like you, my jobs have, until now, actually, my jobs have been like yours. Everybody can hardly wait until the holiday season, because our customers, to them, it's a time where they kind of pull away, or it's. At one point, I was in the multifamily business, and people don't move, which is a big. When people move in an apartment building, it's busy. They got to redo it. They got to, somebody's going out, somebody's coming in. And not a lot of people move between Thanksgiving and New Year's. So for us, that customer base was kind of quiet. Now, different scenario, and we're going to be closing the month, and so it's not a super quiet time. But for many of us, it can be that long weekend, or it could be the time where you finally squeeze in that last bit of vacation. And depending on when the days hit, you may have an actual like Friday afternoon until the following Monday morning off. And I think the treasure of, like, we act different. We as dads act different when we're home and we have some time on our hands, and we're not, stressing about having to get up early the next morning, as always, or getting the presentation done, or getting to the branch and making sure that everything is done on time and complete and everything's been shipped. For some people, that is the case. I feel for them, because I hope they find another way to do it. But yeah, for a lot of people, man, I think as long as, I hope, your kids, it's okay that they feel a difference in us around this time of year. And so let me do this, man. I'm going to list a handful, and I love what you pointed out a little while ago about, for some dads, this might be the time of year that's really tough for whatever reason. Like, I have a friend who had a loved one. I'm speaking of a very specific friend who had a loved one pass away this year. And I know this will be the year of firsts, right? Mm-hmm. This will be the first Thanksgiving, the first Christmas without this loved one. And I know that's going to be very, very difficult for them as a family. And so for some guys, this may not be just all joy and fun at Christmas. And for some guys, maybe they don't have, cash. They don't have a lot of money. Maybe it's tight right now and trying to make ends meet. In that light, I want to rattle off. Okay. I'm going to just kind of like speed round. I'm going to rattle off a handful of ideas, and then I want you to react, Lawson, to a couple of these ideas. Here are some gifts that are basically cash-wise, they're free. They don't cost anything money-wise, that you could consider giving to your kids and your wife, incidentally, this year for Christmas. One of those could be knowing or reading the Bible. And you may go, well, that seems like an odd gift. Well, man, a lot of scripture would talk about how different we are when we know God's word, when we're in God's word. And so giving your family the gift of spending time in God's word is giving them a more mature man, a more mature dad, a dad who's a better,
more patient, more can listen well. Even that listening, just specifically listening, could be a great gift that you might need to give one of your kids this year. You may need to ask them. I remember this past summer, one of my boys said, "Dad, I know what you're trying to do is you're trying to be helpful, but what you're doing is actually making things worse." And I'm like, awesome.
Wow.
Tell me why that is. Right. And so I got to listen to him explain to me what it was that I was doing that, I thought might be helpful, but clearly was not being very helpful. So the gift of listening, the gift of reading the Bible, the gift of a peace in your heart, the gift of forgiveness. And I'm not even sure you need to forgive someone in your home as much as you might need to forgive someone outside your home. And then you become less bitter and less angry and less frustrated. So maybe you don't need to forgive one of your children, but you need to forgive that guy at work, who stole that job from you or lied about you, or that relative who you've been holding that resentment against for a long time. Maybe you need to give your kids a sense of unity. Maybe you need to give them just a sense that they belong in your family. Maybe you need to write them a letter. Maybe one of your kids is out of the house and you may not see them as much this holiday season as you'd like. And so one of the things you could give them would be just a heartfelt letter. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be poetic. It could just be a letter where you write and say, "Hey, I just wanted you to know a couple things I admire about you, or a couple things that I've never forgotten you did as a child." Is there a gift of a letter that you could give to one of your kids?
That's a big one for when our kids, before they had jobs and had money. What do I want from my kids? I'd love a Christmas card where they actually handwrite some stuff in. And oh my gosh, what a great thing that was to get from my daughters, was a letter like that. That's a part of tradition. I talked to Joe earlier today. We're listening to you rattle through that list, man. I am going to sit down and write out all this for myself, because that's really cool. That's inspiring. And it's things that I wouldn't thought of had I not gone through this exercise with you. Something Joe said was he feels like it's a helpful season to help reset their family foundation around some of the things that you've gone through. And he specifically, this is God at work, because he said it, and then you just said it. He said it's a peaceful time, or can be a peaceful time, and helps them as a family get regrounded, sort of a sense of unity among themselves. And the physical time spent together helps, but man, to put some constructive thought into it, I'm doing it myself. I also would encourage the dads listening, take some time and maybe put pen to paper, or pull out your notes app on your iPhone and put down some things that whether you give them, and you proclaim this is a gift to you all, to your family, that you do them so that it results in a gift. I think that's a really cool thought. And listening to you rattle through those, man, that's a lot. That's a much better gift than,
Well, and
physical.
To your point, some of them we give and we're not going to announce them. It's like there's a trumpet and I will now present the gift. It's not so much that it has to be like that. But for example, one simple one, right? Read your kids a story. You may go, "Well, I do that every night." Awesome. Read them 2 stories, let them pick the book, whatever. But we find a way to read our kids a story, and we don't make a big deal about it. But man, later they're going to be, 20, 25, 30 and go, "Oh yeah, I remember, my dad reading stories to me, especially around the holidays," or whatever. Another one that we've started to do a little more as our kids have gotten a bit older. And, I'm in a home where we've raised 5 boys. And the reason I mention that is because sometimes it was hard to find dedicated time to give to any one of the boys, right? It's almost always you got 2 or 3 in tow and they're all doing something, and we're all going to the mall, or we're all going on that, errand, or we're all going on that vacation or whatever. And it's like individual time. If you have the time in the calendar, and if you've got
one-on-one time.
Exactly. And what would really make that even more special is if you could ask your child, "Hey man, if we could go spend an hour or 2 doing something that just you would love to do, what would that be?" and let your child pick the activity. It might be something as simple as drawing a picture on a sheet of paper. They may be artistic and that's fun to them, or throwing football out in the front yard. One of my sons really loves to go to a gun range and shoot. He really loves that. And when he's home from college this December, I know one way that he would really enjoy, one thing he'd really enjoy is if I could go spend an hour or two just shooting some guns with him at a shooting range. He would love that. And it's not super expensive, and he would have a blast. Now, I wouldn't probably choose to do that. That's not my idea of a fun Saturday afternoon, but I don't mind it. I enjoy it enough, and I know he loves it. And so I'll go because I know it's something that he enjoys. So is there something that your kids enjoy that you could go do in that regard? Maybe it doesn't cost anything at all, but you just know even just letting them pick would be a big deal. Hey, Dad, do you wrestle with anger? Man, I sure have, and so have thousands of other dads in our email list. And so what we did for those dads and for you, we built a special digital course called The Anger-Free Dad. This digital course is chock full of almost 50 assets, a bunch of teaching videos, a ton of PDF booklets and worksheets, so you can walk through and understand your anger triggers, the expectations underneath, and how to pull those out of your heart and mind so you can be a dad who is less angry and more at peace. If you take this course and you do not become less angry, you will get all of your money back. Plus, we'll send you some boxing gloves so you can beat up the wall at your house with all of your mad anger. Dad, come take the Anger-Free Dad course today at manhoodjourney.org/anger-free-dad. That's manhoodjourney.org/anger-free-dad.
What do you think about your kids being involved with you to do something for your wife?
Well, I mean, first off, I don't really ever do anything for my wife.
Poor April. April, I'm with you.
Yeah.
If you're out there listening, I'm with you. I'm trying.
Her. I don't no. Actually, it's a great question. I remember last year I took one of my boys to a particular store that I knew she would love stuff from, right? It's like a handmade kind of store in our city. And most of the stuff in this store is from somewhere other than America. So it's like this wood thing from Ethiopia or this beaded necklace from South America or whatever. And they're not super expensive, but they're all handmade. And I knew she'd love that. And I remember one day I was going somewhere and I had one of my boys with me. And I was like, oh, let's go to this one gallery and see if we can find anything for your mom. And the cool part was he was kind of in on the play, right? So he's walking around the store holding stuff up, going, hey, dad, would she like this?
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was like a mini adventure, and we had a blast. And I got her a couple things that even today she still loves, a little tea mug that's cool and painted. Man, nothing quite like the double whammy of taking my kids on an errand where the goal of the errand is to bless my wife. Because not only am I blessing my wife, having fun, creating fun memories with my boys, I'm giving them a little bit of a hint as to how to be a godly husband one day, right? They're picking this stuff up by osmosis. So yeah, great question. I'm not super like intentional. I don't have like mommy shopping day and it's like all focused and scheduled. Maybe some guys are a little more intentional than me in that regard, but certainly for sure, I take my boys along when I think of it.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be necessarily, we're talking gifts and shopping and Christmas and to a degree, but like during the time, grab one of your kids and get them down in the kitchen and, let's sneak down there and make mommy breakfast and surprise her with coffee and breakfast and, get them involved in doing something versus making, if they're making a piece of artwork or something like that, that's different, but not going and buying a gift is, I guess, what I'm saying. But I want to do something for each of them that involves the rest of the people in the family, where we're maybe it is a letter, maybe we're going to do something for them that they wouldn't expect. because we're all going to be at home, it probably depends on like the love language, but doing something for somebody, to a lot of people, it really hits home, and it means so much more than an actual physical gift can. Depends on the person.
Well, and I think one of the common threads across a lot of these gift ideas that we're talking about is time. And I know we mentioned earlier, maybe we don't quite harp on that, but I do think it's very important that I was with a ministry leader last week, and brilliant guy. And one of the things he said to me was, he said, we can't underestimate how important the gift of our time is, especially when it is undivided, focused attention kind of time. So if I were to, I'll go back to the example. If I were to take my son out to the range and we were doing a little shooting, and the whole time I'm there, I'm like texting people and I'm distracted and I'm not paying attention. It doesn't quite count. It doesn't quite count. Or it doesn't send the message that I want to send. And so I guess I would use other words, right? So a gift of time can also be a gift of attention. It can be a gift of focus. It can be a gift of listening. It can be a gift of asking, not probing, like gotcha type questions, but asking it thoughtful questions that just go, hey man, I'd really love to know, what was a big challenge? I have a son coming home from college this December, and he'll be home not for the first time since college, but I mean, this will be his first big break after his first semester in college. And if I'm smart, right? If I'm on my game and I'm thinking, I'll ask him questions about, and we've talked a lot, FaceTime and texting has made going away to college much more of a communal experience, but because he'll sit there with his artboard and show me what he's working on. So we've stayed in very close contact.
That's awesome.
But I'd love to ask him over the holidays, what were a couple things you learned about yourself over the last few months? What were a couple things you learned about living life or managing your own time? Or what was one thing that surprised you about the college experience? I'd love to be pulling that stuff out just by way of hearing his heart and learning more about what's on his mind. And I think for men, we always think of gifts in the context of tangible and physical and money and all that. Man, our time, our attention, our focus. And I would guess, Lawson, this is a little bit of just a random guess. Since you've raised two daughters, I would guess that you probably had a lot of those moments in their teen years where just you spending focused time and attention with them probably really meant a lot to them.
Yeah, it meant a lot to me too. I think you're right. I guess time came up because it can be some vacation time or a long weekend, but it's the attention that matters. What you just said really inspired me. If I knew that I was having a special guest, some business guy or some ministry guy that was going to come to your home and spend some time with you, you would put together some questions. You would get your thoughts together. And like right now, I'm with my girls a good bit because they both live with us. They're in a period of their life where they used to live together in an apartment in Atlanta. Now we're all back together. That's not going to last for who knows, how much longer. But for now, we're together for a few months, and we have been for a little bit. But that quality attention and putting some thoughtful effort into, like you said, what is it that I want to ask Abigail or Olivia, and carve out some specific pointed time where they're like a special guest to me, because there will be a time when I'm going to really miss them and they're not going to be able to come home for the holidays, and they're going to have their own family, thing going on. So I'm going to treat it as if not to go out and buy a special gift, but I'm gonna reframe my mental perspective and get ready for these special guests that we're about to have.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. It's I've often observed around our house, we tend to give our families the worst version of ourselves. Or at least I didn't say the worst version. They see the worst part of us. Maybe it's not the worst version totally, but
they see all parts. They see
all
everything.
parts. That's a better way to say it. They see all parts. And so there are a lot of moments around our home where my kids are like, gee whiz, Dad, you got to stop yelling at us. Like, this is crazy. And I would probably never yell at you that way. You know what I'm saying? I have a filter. I have a filter for what I would say to Lawson. And I probably never yell at you that, but man, I yell at them. And so part of the gift we could give our families this season, and again, if you're listening to this in April and you're listening to this in October, do it now. Give your family the gift. Give your family the gift. Right. Give your family the gift of treating them like a special guest and giving them the same honor that you'd give to a guest who just showed up. Because what we know for sure, right? We know this as dads, like innately, we kind of know it, but we don't always say it out loud. The gifts we can give our family, the most important gifts are gifts of time, gifts of the heart, gifts of a listening ear. We know deep down as dads, those things matter even more. The gift of fun, like we'll play more games, during Christmas. I always like to build a puzzle. Most of my boys, one of my sons enjoys puzzle building. The other four don't really. And Titus is only 6. He pretty much just eats the pieces. And so you really don't want to build a puzzle with Titus unless you like a 95% type puzzle where you go, hey, what happened to 10 of these pieces? And Titus is going, because he's the one who actually ate one of the pieces. But I've got a daughter-in-law now who enjoys puzzle building. Hallelujah, man. My son picked really well. I got a puzzle building daughter-in-law. And so just the other day, my wife and I were talking about, do we have a puzzle around here that she would enjoy building or that we could go get?
That's fun. That's
so
fun.
That when she comes, we'll build it. And the only problem with that is she's like a stud puzzle builder. So like you kind of got to drink coffee and do a bunch of jumping jacks to get ready to be able to keep up with her. Cause she is fast. If you just sat down and built a 1,000-piece puzzle, she'd put down 942 pieces while you're still like turning the corner trying to get the edge. Yeah, you were like,
I was about to get that piece.
I was about to do that
too.
And those other 47 pieces, I had them. I was that close. So for sure, I just want to encourage dads, man, as you think about any time of the year, but if you're listening to this around Christmas, ask yourself, what gift can I give to my family this Christmas? Each individually. It could be all those things we talked about. Go back and listen to the fast-paced list we gave early. It could be any series of gifts, time-based, listening, you name it. Dad, lean into your family and give them some gifts this Christmas. And I pray that you'll have an awesome and very Merry Christmas if you're listening to this around the holidays. If you're listening to this in April, where you been, man? What took you so long? And why are you just now listening to the Christmas episode? Next year, won't you give us a gift? Give me and Lawson a gift of being on time for the episodes. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next week. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.
You've been dozing off to the Father on Purpose podcast featuring Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Now, wake up. Head over to fatheronpurpose.org for more tools that can help you be a godly, intentional, and not completely horrible dad. Remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.